Hey guys, tonight we delve into the remarkable lives and incredible resilience of medieval peasants and the everyday heroes who against all odds endured some of the coldest and most brutal nights in history. From improvised insulation methods to shared resting techniques, and their story is one of resilience, creativity, and unwavering resolve. Before you settle in, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly appreciate what I create here. Feel free to share in the comments where you're joining us from and what time it is for you. It's always interesting to see who is connecting with us from different places around the globe. Now lower the lights, perhaps switch on a fan for a gentle background hum, and let's gently drift into tonight's journey together. When you envision medieval life, you might picture jousting knights, lavish feasts, and joyful fairs. But for the typical peasant, winter was more about survival than celebration. It wasn't merely a season. It was a challenge that returned annually, akin to a particularly harsh instructor who had no faith in do-overs. Imagine this: you're residing in a small hut made of mud and sticks with walls so delicate that you might catch the sound of a bird sneezing from outside. Without insulation, without windows, unless you consider a tiny hole filled with animal skin as one. And certainly no sibling disputes over the temperature. The indoor temperature of your home often hovered just a gentle couple of degrees above whatever the outside weather was up to. If it was chilly outdoors, it was comfortably a bit less chilly inside. Well done. The evenings felt endless. Shadows enveloped the surroundings, the wind whispered eerily, and the fire in the hearth flickered weakly, struggling to provide warmth while merely toasting the toes of the nearest occupant. If you happened to be across the room, apologies, it seems you could have been resting in the great outdoors with less appealing treats. Clothing didn't provide much comfort either. Peasants lacked luxurious fur coats and cozy goose-down blankets. You had a few rough spun wool tunics, perhaps a cloak that had a hint of goat odor, and a wish that stacking them would transform you into a sort of human onion. Spoiler, it didn't really work, and don't even think about cozying up under soft quilts. Beds were frequently just sacks filled with hay or straw, perhaps, with a few old rushes added for comfort and as a little extra some fleas for companionship. Opulence, your essence, is found in the simplicity of medieval peasant existence. The chill was more than just unpleasant. It posed a real threat. Frostbite, hypothermia, and the chilling threat of death from extreme cold loomed persistently, particularly for vulnerable groups like young children and the elderly. Each morning, you opened your eyes still alive, felt like a small wonder, truly deserving of a little celebration. Perhaps a breakfast that's a bit more inviting than a frozen turnip. So yes, enduring a medieval winter wasn't about coziness. It was a matter of clenching your jaw, layering every garment you had, snuggling with your animals, and hoping you wouldn't rise with frost adorning your brows. And the true journey, it was merely starting. If you believe your apartment feels a bit chilly due to a window that won't shut right, let's just say those from a different time might have a different perspective. Their homes weren't merely drafty. They were essentially lively wind tunnels with a roof. Most peasant houses were what historians gently refer to as wattle and daub construction. Interpretation sticks intertwined like a cozy nest, coated with a delightful blend of mud, straw, and animal dung. Indeed, waste. They didn't mean to be unpleasant. Dung was an inexpensive adhesive insulator, and it was consistently easy to find if you catch my drift. These walls, despite the care taken in their application, seemed to surrender easily to the might of a winter storm. The cold wind slipped through every crack and gap, swirling around the one-room homes, ensuring that comfort was always just out of reach. Is there a need for privacy? Not a chance. Cozy? Not particularly. Creating a character? Absolutely. And then there were the rooftops. Thatched roofs appeared charming, no doubt, but after several months of rain and snow, they drooped, dripped, and sometimes welcomed the local critters. Nothing quite captures the essence of a cozy evening like a squirrel unexpectedly landing on your dinner. Windows, if they were present, were amusingly small, and often draped with delicate animal hides or wooden shutters. The cost of glass was so high that even the lord of the manor might struggle to acquire more than a small single pane. And farmers, they were simply content as long as the wind didn't tear the cowhide off the wall during the blizzard. To add to the discomfort, the floors were frequently nothing more than packed earth. When it rained or snowed heavily, mud seeped up through the ground, so you could say they had indoor water features, though they didn't seem to care much for it. In winter, every step inside your own home could feel like moving through a thick fog, where the warmth seems distant and the air is heavy. Chilled from beneath, chilled from above, chilled from within. It felt like a multi-layered attack on your warmth. But medieval peasants weren't the type to complain. They filled the spaces with moss-stuffed old rags into the most troublesome drafts and nestled closely together. Cozy warmth at its best. Imagination persistence and a touch of sheep grease smeared on the walls were frequently the sole barriers keeping them from turning into medieval ice cubes. Because if your house was crumbling and your best defense against the weather was mud and goat hair, well, at least you could find some humor in it. Kind of if your teeth weren't rattling too much. As if the chilling air wasn't enough, medieval peasants also had to contend with a quiet foe emerging from beneath. The icy earth beneath. Floors felt more like distant memories back then. They were merely gentle, subdued areas of earth within your home. Perhaps if fortune smiled upon you, a few strands of straw or some worn rushes had been scattered about to create a semblance of coziness. But don't be fooled, you were dozing just one slighted remark away from the unforgiving ground. And oh, that cold was unyielding. It drifted up from the earth like a mischievous little spirit, weaving its way through the straw into your bones and deep into your very soul. If you happen to let something slip onto the floor during a chilly winter night, well, it has now become a part of the frozen ground. Medieval peasants attempted to navigate this daunting struggle in various ways. One method involved spreading cozy layers of thick straw mats across the floor. If you had the means, or perhaps more realistically, if you could quietly take enough from your neighbor's field without raising suspicion, you could create a reasonable insulating barrier. But straw flattened quickly, became moldy even quicker, and provided an extra crunchy soundtrack to your already restless nights. Some homes placed dried rushes gently onto the dirt instead. From time to time, they would add new rushes on top, neglecting to remove the old ones beneath. As time passed, this gave rise to an intriguing environment filled with decaying plants, fleas, and an array of enigmatic creatures that chose to settle in. It was essentially a layer of soft, ancient fabric beneath the feet. If your carpet had a pulse, was a bit moist, and carried the scent of a soggy canine, the presence of beds for those fortunate enough to have them offered little relief. They were often just simple wooden structures filled with, you might have guessed, more straw or hay. Instead of warm, inviting mattresses, you had jabbing, restless, crinkly layers that offered little comfort against the chill seeping from beneath. Restlessness wasn't about ease. It was a slow, clumsy movement to maintain warmth and prevent one side of your body from becoming numb. The reality is medieval peasants didn't dominate the frigid terrain, but rather adapted to exist uneasily upon it. A restful night wasn't about dreams or comfort. It was about stirring from slumber with every toe still in place. And if you could manage that well, you were ahead of the game. If medieval homes had a single champion during the cold months, it wasn't the roof or the walls, or even the courageous layers of dirt and dung insulation. It was the hearth, a crackling, stubborn fire pit that offered a gentle warmth against the chill, the shadows, and the pervasive dreariness of medieval life. In the heart of almost every humble dwelling, there lay a modest fire. No fireplace with an elaborate stone mantel. No tidy chimney sending the smoke upwards. Instead, you had a simple pit or pile of stones, some half-burned logs, and enough smoke drifting into the room to make you ponder if you were gradually turning into a ham. Indeed, many homes lacked chimneys altogether. Smoke simply tried its hardest. It floated out through tiny openings in the roof, crevices in the walls, or directly into your lungs if it was in a relaxed mood that evening. It wasn't the best for taking in air or for living a long life, but on the bright side, it effectively took care of fleas and other unwelcome visitors. Who needs pest control when you're enveloped in a haze all day long and the hearth was more than just a source of warmth? The kitchen served as the light source and occasionally even as the old-timey equivalent of a television. People lounged around the fire sharing stories, whispering secrets, or simply gazing into the flickering flames as there wasn't much else to occupy their time after the sun dipped below the horizon. Maintaining the warmth wasn't merely a pleasant thought. It was essential. Allowing the flames to fade away at night felt like inviting the chill to creep in and take over. Plus, getting a fire going in winter was more challenging than just lighting a match. You had to work with flint steel kindling and more prayers than you could count. Each family member had a task tending to the flickering flames, observing the glowing embers, adding peat sticks, or if fortunate, a cherished piece of dry wood. It was an ongoing struggle between human determination and the enveloping chill that seemed intent on extinguishing your spirit. The hearth offered a flicker of hope, yet without it, the struggle for existence felt utterly futile. It was a dim, flickering, frequently underwhelming little fire. But in a medieval winter, it was the gentle pulse of hope. If there was one thing medieval peasants dreaded more than running out of ale, it was the thought of the fire extinguishing during the night. Without that warm, flickering lifeline, the chill would settle in quicker than an unwelcome visitor after a long day. And in the stillness of winter, reigniting a fire from nothing wasn't merely a hassle. It could be perilous. There were no matches at that time. Are there any lighters drift away? Rekindling a fire involved gently striking flint and steel, hoping for that one elusive spark, and then nurturing it with care and the last bits of dry kindling you hadn't used up in the past few days. Picture attempting to accomplish all of this in the frigid darkness, feeling drowsy with icy fingers. Now add a distant wolf's howl for a touch of inspiration. So the peasants became clever. They tended to the fire, letting it settle down gently. No, not in a snug savings account. Banking involved gently tucking the glowing coals beneath a soft layer of ash just before drifting off. The ash enveloped the glowing coals like a soft cover, preserving their warmth and life, just enough to last until dawn. If done correctly, you could meander over at dawn, nudge the pile, gently toss in some fresh wood, and just like that, a fire without the chill. But what if it wasn't done correctly? Well, let's just say mornings have become significantly chillier and a bit more irritable. Fire banking was a craft handed down from generation to generation, like a cherished family secret. Everyone held on to their own little mysteries. Some suggested to use only dry ash. Some people maintained that a touch of moisture was essential. Some nestled the embers snugly. Others allow them to relax. One could easily ignite a spirited debate from the past simply by proposing an improved way to manage the flames. It was the olden days of debating cooking methods, but with a touch more urgency in the air. At times, just banking the fire didn't quite do the trick. A howling wind could creep through a crack and extinguish it, or a clumsy sheep might accidentally wander into the hearth. Indeed, it occurred. That's why some families took turns getting up in the night to check the coals, essentially the medieval version of wandering to the thermostat in a daze. Ultimately, fire banking was more about securing a few extra moments of comfort than it was about conquering the elements. And if you stirred to even a single surviving ember, that was your triumph, right here. And just enough to confront another day of enduring the chill. In medieval times, the saying about increased joy wasn't solely focused on gatherings. It was a strategy for enduring the cold season. When the fires sputtered and the freezing winds whistled through every crack, there was one comforting source of warmth: each other. And if that meant dozing off side by side with your whole family neighbor's livestock and perhaps a rather bewildered goose, then so be it. Forget about boundaries. Privacy was hardly a thought. On the coldest nights, the aim was not to find warmth. It was hard to stir from the chill of the floor. Entire households nestled into the coziest corner of the house, bundled in whatever bits of fabric they could gather, creating what could best be described as a desperate, snoring human lasagna. Little ones nestled close to their parents, while grandparents cozily tucked themselves beneath the blankets, and if Cousin Ethel happened to drop by, there was always a spot for her too. If you were fortunate, you found yourself nestled in the center, surrounded by warmth from every direction. If you found yourself in such a predicament, you were teetering on the brink, akin to resting beside the entrance of a cold storage, and pity to the soul who stirred too much in their slumber. You adjust your position slightly, and in an instant, Aunt Maud is sent tumbling into the chilly draft by the wall. Congratulations, you've taken on the role of the family villain. At times, the bedding was shared, a communal straw mattress that gradually sank beneath the nightly burden of many generations. And since cleanliness wasn't exactly a top priority back then, let's just say it wasn't the most pleasant place to rest. But hey, when it's you against the chill, you stop being choosy. The warmth of the body was not merely pleasant. It served a purpose. Some medieval guides even suggested intentionally placing the strongest, warmest individuals on the outer edges of the group, serving as human shields against the chill. Babies and frail elders were nestled snugly in the center, cherished like the precious little warmth providers they were. This wasn't merely about getting by, however. As the days passed, it seamlessly integrated into our routine, becoming a cherished aspect of our family connections. Long winter nights spent cozily together brought about storytelling, singing, and surely some fascinating conversations softly exchanged beneath a shared wool blanket. So next time your sibling takes your blanket or your dog sprawls across the bed, just keep in mind, at least you're not squished between a loud uncle and a rather critical goat. If you think dealing with modern roommates is tough, just wait until you hear about the winter companions of medieval peasants. Cows, goats, pigs, chickens, really anything that breathes and has a touch of warmth. Bringing animals indoors wasn't merely a quirky village tradition. It was essential for survival. Livestock provided a cozy warmth, and in a drafty hovel where the wind howled more insistently than your own hunger, each small degree felt significant. Additionally, having your goat close by meant there was a bit more peace of mind, reducing the chances of it being taken by a neighbor under the cover of darkness. Two birds, one rather unpleasant stone. At night, the house turned into a warm, bustling haven. Chickens settled in cozy corners, pigs grunted softly by the warmth of the hearth, and cows sprawled comfortably against the walls, leisurely chewing cud as if they were in their own little paradise. It lacked any sense of glamour, quite the opposite, really. If you've ever found yourself in a car during a summer road trip with someone who neglected personal hygiene, picture that scenario. But it's a cow, it's winter, and there's honestly nowhere else to wander. The scent's dreamy. By springtime, the scent of a shared winter was quite overwhelming. You didn't need to light a candle. Your senses were already drifting away on a gentle journey. But medieval peasants cultivated a discerning sense of smell. They hardly voiced any grievances, for they were aware of a certain uncomfortable reality. The greater the number of animals indoors, the less chance of chilly toes come morning. Some animals were lucky enough to have the best spots. Cows, being the largest and coziest, often found themselves in the spotlight close to the family. Goats were permitted to come nearer for their coziness, and because goats, being goats, would inevitably discover a way inside regardless. Chickens settled in the rafters or nestled in old baskets, while pigs, they were just indifferent. They settled in wherever they felt like it, likely right in the center of the floor. Naturally, having livestock in your bedroom came with its own set of challenges. Picture yourself gently slipping into a serene slumber, only to be jolted awake by a chicken choosing your hair as its favorite spot, or feeling something questionable underfoot. At the break of dawn. Indeed, mornings in the medieval era might bring unexpected events. Even with the clamor, the scents, and the rare kick to the side, the peasants grasp the straightforward calculations. Chill settles in, and the cows find themselves snuggling regardless of their wishes. In the struggle against winter's chilling grasp, a warm, slightly slobbery cow breath was frequently the crucial element between survival and demise. In the chilly winters of medieval times, style wasn't focused on appearance. It was about staying alive. Peasants weren't flipping through the pages. They were bundling up as if gearing up for a confrontation with the grim reaper himself. The guideline was straightforward. If you had it, you donned it. At times, it feels like everything hits you all at once. First, the basic undertunic, a rough, likely not-so-fresh linen shirt. A heavier woolen tunic on top of that. Then another, if you possessed it. Slip into some leggings that droop at the knees, let a rugged cloak hang loosely over your shoulders, and if fortune smiles upon you, toss a well-worn sheepskin atop it all, like a cherished trophy. Congratulations, you are now about 10% warmer and 90% itchier. Boots were a delightful indulgence. Many peasants bundled their feet in layers of cloth or old rags and nestled them into wooden clogs. If the chill still nipped at you, well, you just added another layer and wished for warmth to keep your toes safe. And just let go of the thought of washing all these layers. Washing your clothes in the middle of winter meant dragging them to a frozen stream, smashing through the ice, and then waiting 2 days for your only shirt to dry if it didn't just freeze into a tragic shirt cycle. Everything felt heavy and slow, as if time itself was taking a long, drawn-out nap. Most peasants sensibly concluded that the scent of smoke, sweat, and sheep was a minor inconvenience compared to the chill of the cold. Surprisingly, the accumulation of dirt and grease came with an unexpected perk. Cozy warmth. That dirty layer trapped warmth within. It resembled a medieval Gore-Tex jacket, only with a stronger odor and much less social acceptability in the present day. Hats, scarves, and gloves were cherished comforts. A cozy woolen cap might just be the key to getting through the night without waking up to a chilly surprise in the morning. Gloves were frequently crafted from whatever bits of leather or fabric could be found, sometimes resembling more like forlorn puppet costumes than anything stylish. Children were especially swaddled until they resembled overstuffed turnips moving slowly and clumsily around the house. The aim was to retain as much valuable warmth as one could. Vibe, gracefulness. I haven't come across them before. Cozy comfort was the true medieval show of status. So the next time you grumble about bundling up for a cold day, just keep that in mind. Medieval peasants shuffled about draped in layers of fabric that made them resemble oversized laundry bags, feeling fortunate for their attire. In the medieval peasant playbook, dirt was more than just a thing to wash away. It was almost essential for getting by. As it turns out, getting a little messy wasn't a sign you'd lost your way. It was strategic, calm, and thoughtful. Could we possibly call it brilliance? Winter presented a rather unique challenge. Warmth escaping. Clean clothes, particularly freshly laundered linen, surprisingly did a poor job of providing warmth. They had a lightness to them, definitely. But when the air temperature lingered in that uncomfortable zone between chill and discomfort, breathable wasn't really a strong advantage. That's when the soil made its appearance. As peasants moved through the days, their clothing remained unwashed, accumulating layers of grime, natural body oils, and good old-fashioned mud on their tunics, cloaks, and leggings. As time passed, this natural armor filled the small spaces in the fabric, enhancing the clothes' ability to resist the wind. It felt like a cozy shield from the elements, just more odorous. Sure, you had an aroma reminiscent of a goat who lost a wager, but guess what? You felt cozy. Interestingly, some people in medieval times thought that bathing too frequently during the winter months might lead to illness. It's best to maintain that sacred, untainted shield as it is. Bathing was infrequent laundry, even less so, and soap, when available, was saved for significant moments like the bishop's visit, or perhaps just before one's passing. Enhancing the approach, peasants piled on their garments without altering the ones beneath. You casually tossed your new layer over last month's without a second thought. Eventually, you became a walking museum of the past 6 weeks, every stain softly narrating the heroic tale of that one time I slipped in the mud but didn't die. To outside observers, medieval peasants might have appeared as if they had entirely surrendered to neglect, but the peasants understood the truth. That worn, tattered tunic was a cozy barrier against the chill of frostbite. It wasn't glamorous, but it certainly wasn't worth the risk of succumbing to the cold just to have a floral scent. Besides, in a world where everyone had an overwhelming odor, you weren't really bothering anyone. Nose blindness felt like a constant state of being. Indeed, during the harsh winters of medieval times, dirt was not seen as a setback. Rather, it was a style statement and a practical necessity. If by February you sported a heavy, oily exterior, you were truly thriving in life. If you imagined medieval peasants cozying up in soft feather beds with fancy quilts during winter, think again. The reality was somewhat more cozy. And by rustic, I mean, let's rest on a heap of dried foliage and see what happens. Beds in the medieval peasant world were typically a simple wooden frame, if one could manage to have one topped with a large sack filled with straw hay or old rushes. That's all. Without memory foam, orthopedic support, or the luxury of a 5-star hotel, it feels quite ordinary. Just a crunchy, lumpy, slightly pokey mess that smelled faintly of barnyard and wistfulness. Every toss and turn in the night brought a soothing soundtrack of crinkling straw and the occasional gentle poke from a wayward stalk. Some peasants even skipped the wooden frame altogether and just threw the straw straight onto the dirt floor, creating a cozy, ground-level resting experience that modern influencers would probably rebrand as earth-connected relaxation. The straw mattresses were not only lacking in comfort, but they also felt fleeting. As time passed, the straw became flat-developed mold, drew in insects, and ultimately transformed into a zone of biological concern. Changing the straw was quite the occasion, typically happening a few times a year if you were attentive, or whenever your bed began to shift on its own. Hastily chosen options were a favored substitute. These long grasses were spread thick on the floor, sometimes mixed with herbs like lavender or rosemary, to soften the strong scent of livestock that lingered in daily life. The fresh rushes had a delightful scent, but it lingered only for a short while. After that, they became part of the soft, worn landscape inside the house, merging effortlessly with dirt food scraps and whatever else drifted in. And let's not overlook the companions of comfort. Fleas, lice, and other delightful little creatures found straw bedding just as cozy as the peasants did. If you found yourself more awake from scratching than actually resting, well done. You were truly embracing the genuine medieval lifestyle. Even with the challenges, these simple beds provided much-needed comfort. Piles of straw offered a vital insulating layer against the frozen ground, and huddling together atop them formed cozy pockets of shared warmth, a delightful version of medieval central heating. So next time you settle into your cozy, welcoming mattress, just remember somewhere out there a medieval peasant is looking down at you from history, grinning through a mouthful of missing teeth and saying, "Must be nice," when you reside in a dwelling crafted from twigs earth. And hope you soon realize that the chill of winter winds isn't merely bothersome. It feels like a direct affront. Medieval peasants faced the chill not only from the outside, but also within their own homes, equipped with whatever they could stuff into the cracks. And believe me, there were plenty of cracks. Walls drooped, mud fell apart, a thatch hung low. The chill had a way of creeping into every corner each night, as if a playful spirit was determined to make its presence known. Sealing up the house turned into a soothing ritual. Peasants filled the gaps with moss straw, bits of old cloth, bundles of dry grass, and occasionally even animal hair. If it had a gentle texture, a comforting feel, or offered a hint of warmth, it was tucked away in some nook or cranny. Some particularly determined souls lazily daubed extra layers of mud and dung over the outside of their walls as an annual winter project. Picture yourself in the biting cold, applying frigid manure to your own home, while softly whispering, "This is perfectly acceptable. This is indulgence." In a sense, it truly was. Roof leaks were yet another struggle. Thatch, though affordable and abundant, didn't quite hold up against water, particularly after enduring several seasons of rain and snow. Peasants would gently stuff gaps in the roof with leftover pieces of cloth, bundles of reeds, or in times of real need, clumps of turf taken from the closest field. Every home gradually began to resemble a somewhat melancholic patchwork quilt, crafted by someone who lost interest midway. Doors. Are you talking about the windows? If you possessed them, you were fortunate. But even then, they were barely more than wooden boards held together by iron nails and sheer determination. Window openings were frequently shielded with animal hides or heavy fabric saturated in animal fat to minimize the harsh drafts and contribute an intriguing scent of mystery meat to the home. Each evening felt like a struggle against the cunning chill that crept in quietly. One moment you were cozy, and the next a sharp breeze would hit the one spot you overlooked, jolting you back to awareness, like an unwelcome chill. Yet somehow, through cleverness, stubbornness, and a refusal to accept slightly frozen as a permanent state of being, medieval peasants patched, stuffed, and muddled their way through the harshest winters nature could throw at them, one muddy handful at a time. When the chill nips at you, making it difficult to find rest at night, medieval peasants had a remedy. Don't even bother acting like everyone is dozing off simultaneously. Instead, they devised a survival strategy that would impress any military commander dozing in turns. It wasn't a big, bustling operation with loud signals and attendance checks. It was much easier and filled with a sense of urgency. Half the household remained alert, tending to the fire and sealing off stray drafts, while the other half nestled under worn blankets and hay, seeking a few fleeting moments of rest in the chill. The fire required ongoing care. Left alone, it would fade away, and getting it going again, was about as simple as coaxing a sleepy donkey to move. So someone had to keep watch over the embers, and since no one felt like moving once they were finally cozy, families took turns with the shifts. You drifted off for a little while, got nudged awake, then shuffled over to the hearth to poke, prod, and coax the fire back to life, all while avoiding stepping on a goat. The rotation lacked excitement. There were no night vision goggles, no late-night snacks, and certainly no tempting snooze buttons for just a few more moments of rest. Just stiff joints, heavy eyelids, and a growing annoyance toward whoever made the loudest noise during your shift. Children who could grasp a stick were enlisted, discovering early on that during the cold months, everyone had to contribute or face the chill. Grandparents often lingered by the fire, their experience guiding them. And honestly, the challenges of moving due to arthritis made settling down and rising again quite the task. And when it was your turn to rest, best of luck. With people shifting around, animals stirring, the wind gently pushing against the walls, and the rare, unexpected poke from a sibling who without meaning to turned over a bit too forcefully. Finding a moment of true rest felt like a rare blessing. Yet in spite of the weariness, the system functioned. Resting in intervals ensured that there was always someone watching with reluctant hands, prepared to maintain the warmth of the fire. The embers lingered on, and in turn so did the family. So next time you complain about getting up to adjust the thermostat or let the cat out, think about the medieval peasant peering into a smoky fire at 3 a.m. Pondering if toes were truly that significant after all. It's a bit chilly when you find yourself pondering each breath just to keep going. Medieval peasants didn't merely contend with the biting cold using cloaks, fires, and inventive resting setups. They even changed the rhythm of their breathing to make it through the night. The issue was straightforward. Slow, relaxed breathing drew in the cool air effortlessly. In a world where pneumonia could take you away quicker than a whispered prayer that was a gamble no one was willing to make. So peasants mastered the technique of what you could refer to as survival breathing. Rather than gasping for air as if they had just completed a race, they maintained a calm, gentle rhythm, breathing softly and steadily through their noses. The concept was to softly heat the air, entering their lungs just a touch before it arrived. It wasn't flawless, but it was an improvement over struggling to breathe through the winter months. If you happen to inhale a large gulp of chilly air, well done. You've just secured yourself a week of coughing up what seems like your very essence, with no medical help around, and grandma remedying you with steaming onion tea and earnest prayers. Some individuals even pulled parts of their cloaks, shawls, or rags up over their faces while they rested, forming a cozy, breath-warming barrier. Naturally, this also resulted in a damp, somewhat soggy fabric patch stuck to your mouth by morning, but at least it was better than feeling the chill from within. Little ones learned these tricks from a young age. Parents would gently remind little ones not to pant like dogs while indoors during the chilly months. And honestly, with the rigid breathing exercises, scratchy wool layers, and the experience of dozing off beside a goat with a rather troublesome digestive system, childhood winters in medieval times were a unique kind of challenge. As darkness enveloped the world, nestled in soft straw beneath layers of warm cloaks and beside a softly steaming cow, the rhythm of breathing transformed into a soothing melody. Gentle, unhurried, focused solely on the essentials, resembling a somber medieval retreat, but with added chill and a lack of uplifting sayings. In the grand survival playbook, it wasn't the most exciting strategy, but it got the job done. One shallow breath at a time, the villagers drifted through another night in the long, relentless battle against winter. In the unending struggle against the harshness of medieval winter, peasants stumbled upon an unexpected secret weapon, a satisfied belly. It seems that one of the most effective methods to ward off the chill wasn't an additional itchy wool cloak. It was indulging in something warm and comforting just before drifting off. Calories brought a cozy feeling. The more your body had to process, the more it warmed itself up while doing the task. It's fundamental medieval thermodynamics. Indulge in a hearty feast, create some warmth within, and perhaps, just perhaps, make it through the night without becoming a frozen figure of the common folk. What did medieval peasants stack on their plates before settling in for a long, chilly night? Imagine rich, hearty stews laden with root vegetables such as turnips, onions, and parsnips. Grains were true saviors as well. Warm oat porridge, comforting barley gruel, or hearty, chewy rye bread. If fortune smiled upon you, perhaps after a festive day or a bountiful feast, you might find a piece of salted pork or a slice of dried sausage added to the pot. This wasn't cozy food in the Instagram sense. No elaborate display, no fancy decorations. It was one massive, somewhat brown dish meant to settle in your stomach like a comforting weight, gently smoldering through the night and providing a touch of warmth. It wasn't merely about consuming a large quantity. It was about making wise food choices. Foods that took longer to digest offered a gentle, consistent flow of comfort. Rich foods were especially valued not only for the energy they offered, but also because they digest more slowly than lean meat. A cozy belly filled with hearty stew, warm bread, and just a touch too much lard. Ultimate medieval winter indulgence. Parents ensured that even the most selective little ones enjoyed their meals fully. Nobody seemed to mind that little Thomas wasn't fond of turnips. You either enjoyed the turnips or you spent the night wrapped in thoughts of how much you longed for them. Strict yet impactful parenting, medieval aesthetic, evil, naturally indulging in late-night snacks brought along its own set of challenges. You may feel cozy, but you were also inviting a night filled with strange, colorful dreams sparked by a stomach working hard to digest an entire field's worth of cabbages. Was it really worth it, of course? Because ultimately the common folk weren't seeking a gourmet dining experience. They were striving to endure. And if that meant drifting off to sleep, feeling full a bit heavy and softly inhaling through your nose next to a warm cow, well, that was just another evening in the endless journey to witness another chilly dawn. Long before electric blankets and fancy heated mattress pads, medieval peasants had to find inventive ways to cozy up when it was time to rest. And that's how the simple hay box and the cozy heated stone became winter's quiet champions. Let's begin with the hay box. It had a charming simplicity, and it truly did. Yet the concept was nothing short of brilliance. Peasants would take a sturdy wooden box, line it thickly with hay, and use it to store food that had been cooked earlier, keeping it cozy for hours. Leftover stew, warm porridge, toss it into the hay box, cover it up, and it remained cozy enough for a late-night snack without the worry of reigniting the fire. Medieval slow cookers, essentially. But peasants didn't merely focus on food. They understood that if hay could hold on to the warmth from a stew pot, it could surely embrace the warmth from something even more delightful, rocks. Step into the age of the warm stone. Before drifting off to sleep, someone, likely the unfortunate child who lost the family debate, would pick up a flat stone and toss it into the center of the hearth fire. After roasting it until it was almost too hot to handle a delicate balance between useful and a serious burn, they'd retrieve it with a stick or some old tongs. The stone, still radiating a comforting warmth, would be gently wrapped in rags, nestled into an old piece of cloth, or placed into a clay pot, then tucked under the hay, in the mattress, or at the foot of the bed. A medieval heating pad, prepared to face the chill of the frozen ground. Naturally, there were some uncertainties. If you didn't wrap the stone properly well, it seems you've created a cozy little situation with a small, localized house fire. And if it happened to land on your foot, let's just say that winter mishaps weren't solely the result of slipping on ice. But when everything went right, that stone offered a soothing, gentle warmth that lingered for hours. It wasn't extravagant, but when you resided in a half-frozen hut, comfort was simply not waking up with icicles hanging from your nose. In the vast collection of medieval winter survival techniques, a warm stone nestled in some hay may not seem particularly exciting. But for those weary souls grasping at any warmth they could discover, it felt like a small wonder. In a medieval peasant's home, the hearth served more than just the purpose of cooking dinner. It felt like one of us. A moody, hazy, occasionally difficult family member, certainly, but still utterly vital for existence, particularly when it was time to rest. The nearer you were to the warmth, the higher your chances of stirring from the chill. That meant sleeping arrangements were more about strategic positioning than personal preference. Infants, the elderly, and those who are unwell or weak were given priority for the best spots by the fire. Parents, older kids, and sturdier adults spread out from there like cozy layers of warmth. Being assigned a spot close to the fire felt like a gentle embrace. It was simple survival calculations. Babies were delicate sources of warmth, and elders were treasured keepers of family wisdom. And let's be real, the most delightful whispers. Ensuring they were enveloped in cozy comfort was essential. But it wasn't all warm and snug by the flames. Too close, and you might find yourself roused with your hair slightly singed or your cloaks quietly smoldering. Too far, and it felt like you were settling down in a chilly freezer. It was a gentle sway. Stay close enough to enjoy the warmth of the fire, but not so close that you'd have to tell your neighbor why you resembled a slightly overdone meal. The fire also didn't radiate comfort uniformly. It primarily scorched those right in front of it, while the others scrambled for the slim beam of warmth like sluggish creatures vying for a rare spot of sunlight. If you happened to drift off with your face toward the fire, you could enjoy one delightfully cozy side, while the other might be so icy it feels like you could tap on it. Pets and livestock naturally found their way in as well. A dog could snuggle up between you and the fire, its tail swaying just a bit, too near the flickering flames. Chickens occasionally settled delicately on hearthstones, murmuring gently into the night like small, cozy sentinels of comfort. Every crackle of the logs, every shift of glowing embers felt like a gentle whisper of comfort. You're still here. You're still cozy. For the time being. And so Peasant slipped into a restless slumber serenaded by the fire's gentle pops and hisses, each breath creating tiny clouds in the cold air beyond the fire's delicate boundary. It wasn't quite ideal. It felt quite uneasy. But it was existence, holding on to comfort by a fragile strand of glowing embers. In the medieval world, no one made it through winter solo unless they fancied becoming a rather fashionable ice sculpture by January. Survival extended beyond just the family circle. It was a village project, a cozy, muddled, gentle collaboration where everyone's comfort and existence relied on one another. The peasants understood that during the bleakest days of winter, a robust fire and a stack of hay could provide only limited comfort. If your neighbor's house fell into silence, you noticed. If the smoke from old Tom's hearth suddenly ceased its gentle ascent into the sky, someone would surely wander over to investigate. And not solely due to Tom owing you a chicken, though that could be a factor, but because togetherness signified endurance. Villages had unofficial winter watchers, often the young or the elderly, who couldn't work the fields but could keep an eye on who was coughing too hard, who hadn't come to barter at the market in a few days, or whose home looked a little too quiet in the morning frost. These individuals were like the medieval equivalent of neighborhood watch, lacking the reflective vests, but accompanied by a greater number of sheep. If a family's fire went out, it was almost a crisis. A thoughtful neighbor might hurry over with a warm coal wrapped in cloth, or even more kindly welcome them into their own cozy, bustling home for the evening. Yes, it meant fitting in 4 more people into a tight spot, but it was preferable to discovering frozen companions when spring arrived. Communal food stores contributed as well. In the harshest of winters, villages would gather their remaining salted meat grain and dried vegetables. It was a weary kind of charity, with everyone having so little yet, those few shared meals could mean the difference between barely making it to spring or not. Even children grasped the importance of the situation. They assisted in bringing wood shared warmth and hurried with important messages when someone was in need. No one was too little or too weary when winter came knocking. Sure, medieval villages weren't all warmth and cheer. Feuds lingered, disputes over land goats, or who borrowed whose good cooking pot seemed to drift on endlessly. But when the nights turned chillingly cold, old grudges were often softly set aside. After all, a competitor was still worth saving because the next day, it could be you in need of help. In the chilly embrace of winter, the village transformed into a cozy, unyielding family. Occasionally chaotic, frequently amusing, and consistently resolute in their quest to stick together. One muddy boot, one crackling ember, one frozen smile at a time, drifting gently into a haze of calm. When medieval peasants encountered the relentless chill of winter, they didn't merely add layers of cloaks or tend to the fire. They turned to prayer. Quite a bit. Because when the wind howled like wolves outside your paper-thin walls and the fire shrank into sullen embers, you craved every possible advantage, including a touch of divine intervention. Faith wasn't merely a Sunday ritual back then. It was intricately intertwined with every chilly exhale. Before settling into the cozy embrace of straw and wool, families would gather whispering quick prayers to ensure the warmth of the fire, the safety of the roof, and the comfort of their toes come morning. Saints transformed into more than just remote sacred beings. They stood as the guardians against the chill of winter. Saint Blaise, for example, was invoked for safeguarding against throat issues. Not a trivial issue when a single breath of frigid air could leave you gasping for your very essence. St. Nicholas wasn't merely the cheerful gift-bringer of later tales. He was also called upon to safeguard homes from unexpected disaster during the harsh, perilous months. Superstitions nestled themselves comfortably within the fabric of daily survival. Some families gently sprinkled a bit of holy water near the hearth before drifting off, wishing it would shield them from pesky spirits or at the very least playful drafts. Others marked doorways with blessed chalk after certain feast days, hoping for warmth and luck to gently drift inside. Candles had their part to play as well. Special vigil candles, often blessed by the local priest or the most pious old woman in the village, were sometimes kept burning throughout the night, a flickering plea against the cold darkness creeping at the walls. And naturally, no earnest winter prayer gathering felt whole without a handful of commitments. Dear Lord, if you could help us make it through this night, I promise I'll be more considerate to my neighbor, even the one who keeps taking our turnips. Faith was not just a distant notion. It was a constant pressing dialogue every day. The peasants weren't seeking extravagance, merely the means to endure. A touch of warmth, a bite to eat, and just one more day to get by until spring finally released its icy hold on their small villages. It was simple, raw hope whispered into the smoky rafters, tangled in breathless prayers, and tucked under itchy blankets that somehow carried them through the long, unyielding nights of winter. Despite all the creativity, hopes, and determination medieval peasants poured into facing winter, the reality was quite stark. At times, it just felt insufficient. And when winter triumphed, it didn't merely claim a few unfortunate souls. It engulfed entire families, whole villages, enveloping them in a stillness beneath a thick blanket of snow and ice. Some winters felt especially heavy. Much like the notorious Great Famine Winter of 1315, when relentless rains ruined crops, livestock perished, and frigid temperatures transformed an already harsh reality into a prolonged, exhausting catastrophe. People were so weary that tales circulated of consuming shoe leather bark and, in the most unsettling instances, one another. Letting the fire go out wasn't merely a hassle. It could often lead to dire consequences. Without the hearth's meager warmth, families nestled closely together for their last moments. Neighbors would occasionally find entire families in spring bodies, entwined in a frozen hold, as if seeking to share a bit more warmth until the very last moment. Structures might give way beneath the burden of thick snow or relentless ice storms. A roof collapsing in the stillness of a frigid night wasn't merely disastrous. It frequently proved deadly. Struggling through thigh-deep snow to seek refuge from neighbors wasn't a sure thing either, particularly if those neighbors were already at their limit. Illness also enjoyed the chill. Starvation drained the body, and cramped, smoky homes became breeding grounds for pneumonia, bronchitis, and other dangerous infections. A mild cough in December might lead to something much more serious by January. And then there was the soft horror: frostbite. Fingers, toes, even ears turned dark and lifeless, while remaining connected to their owners. Some villagers endured the harsh winters, losing parts of themselves in the process, a somber testament to their survival that whispered, "I persevered, yet winter claimed a part of me." Yet what's most unsettling isn't just the death, it's the strange familiarity of it. People understood that with each winter, some of them would not witness the return of warmth. Death was a familiar visitor, just another neighbor at the door, cloaked in frost, patiently awaiting its turn. Even in the harsh chill and unending danger, medieval peasants trudged forward, resolute mourning, holding on to existence. Because as long as there was one ember left in the hearth, one breath hanging in the frozen air, there was still a struggle worth enduring. When we reflect on medieval peasants, those weary, frost-bitten survivors of relentless winters, it's easy to focus solely on their struggles. The cracked hands, the frozen toes, the smoke-choked huts. Yet, hidden beneath all that effort is something much stronger, a heritage of fierce, unwavering creativity and relentless perseverance. They lacked central heating thermal jackets and those inviting memory foam mattresses. They couldn't even entertain the thought of making it to spring. But what they had and what they left behind was the blueprint for endurance. Every hay-stuffed mattress, every hand-banked fire, every moss-crammed wall gap seemed to whisper stories of human creativity gently unfolding in the quiet moments of life. Confronted with overwhelming challenges, they remained steady and resolute. They adjusted. They absorbed knowledge from the land, from one another, and from the harsh lessons etched by every relentless winter. Their communities were founded on deeper connections than just the land they shared. They were created through a common need to endure. They shared lessons on caring for the unwell, on gathering resources when supplies dwindled, and on the belief that aiding a chilly neighbor today could lead to support in return tomorrow. They embraced the idea that no one faces winter in solitude. Their faith as well was a form of perseverance. They gently intertwined prayers into their daily routines, not merely from a place of fear, but from a soft sense of hope. Delicate, persistent hope that the dawn may bring a touch more warmth, a hint more light. Hope that after 100 long nights, spring would eventually arrive, and life would manage to break through the icy earth. And in a way, it truly did. Due to their sacrifices and the quiet triumphs they achieved enduring another night and weathering yet another storm, future generations flourished. Bit by frozen bit, they nudged humanity onward, weathering winters their forebears could scarcely endure, until warmth and comfort transformed from distant dreams into everyday expectations. Their effort, creativity, and dedication are woven quietly into the fabric of our everyday existence. Every snug blanket, every inviting home, every relaxed winter night spent enjoying tea beneath gentle illumination. All of it is the end result of countless medieval peasants resisting the chill of the night. So the next time the wind whispers outside your double-paned window, perhaps take a moment to think of them. The unknown brave souls who transformed trembling existence into a lasting heritage. One flicker, one sigh, one persistent pulse at a time. Anne Boleyn entered the world without a crown adorning her head or legions at her command. Born around 1501, possibly at Blickling Hall or Hever Castle, she was the daughter of Thomas Boleyn, a determined diplomat, and Elizabeth Howard, a noblewoman with significant family connections. In the vast tapestry of Tudor society, Anne's arrival hardly made a noticeable wave. Yet from these humble beginnings, something remarkable was quietly unfolding. A life that might eventually sway the trajectory of English history. From a young age, Anne distinguished herself not through riches, but through her intellect. She was clever-spirited, and by all accounts, effortlessly captivating. Seeing her promise, her family decided to send her overseas to the continent, marking the start of her educational journey. First, she served Margaret of Austria in the shimmering court of the Netherlands, an experience that few English girls could ever imagine. There, Anne took in the nuances of diplomacy-polished etiquette and the delicate interplay of European politics. But it was in France that Anne's brilliance was gently refined. She lingered for years in the refined courts of Queen Claude and Queen Marguerite of Navarre, absorbing the subtle art of influence. Grace, charm, cleverness. While other young women focused on their embroidery, Anne effortlessly navigated conversation, intrigue, and the subtle art of drawing attention without appearing to desire it. By the time she returned to England in the early 1520s, Anne was something unique. A woman who could match the elegance of European nobility while embodying the aspirations of an emerging English family. She didn't fit the mold of traditional beauty. Even her admirers acknowledged this fact. But she was captivating. Heavy-lidded eyes that glimmered with thought, a soft melodic voice, a manner of moving that hinted at intention just shy of being hidden beneath layers of elegant poise. Anne didn't merely walk into rooms. She shifted their very essence. In an era where a woman's destiny was frequently determined by her lineage and marital ties, Anne chose to resist fading into the background. She had witnessed the influence that charm and intellect could exert in distant courts, and she planned to apply that understanding in her own realm. Anne Boleyn was just a young woman at that time, bright, driven, and yet to be proven. But history was already starting to awaken around her. The girl who returned to England had transformed beyond being merely Thomas Boleyn's daughter. She was a participant in a grand scheme, one that would soon envelop the very throne. When Anne Boleyn returned to the English court, she was unlike anyone the nobility had ever encountered. In a world filled with delicate, unassuming English roses, Anne was a tempest, vibrant, erratic, and utterly captivating. Her dark hair, bold eyes, and quick, sharp wit set her apart from the gentle, obedient ladies who filled the court of King Henry VIII. At first, she played the role expected of her, a maid of honor to Queen Catherine of Aragon. But even in the Queen's shadow, Anne's presence flickered softly like a gentle flame that refuses to be extinguished. She moved with a gentle elegance, conversed in French as if it were second nature, and laughed with a calm assurance that many women seldom showed. Men observed. Women whispered softly. The court murmured softly about the captivating Boleyn girl. It wasn't long before she caught the most perilous gaze of all the king himself. Henry VIII often engaged in playful banter. His court was a tranquil realm of hushed promises and hidden connections. But Anne had a unique quality. She remained unfazed by his compliments and did not rush into his embrace like many others had. She playfully nudged. She pushed back. She declined. Henry, a man accustomed to immediate admiration, found himself entranced. The more Anne kept him at a distance, the further he sank. Letters drifted between them, softly echoing with whispers of love, hints of frustration, and gentle waves of longing. Henry extended to her the position of royal mistress, an influential yet unofficial role within the court. Anne surprisingly declined. She would not fade into the background, a fleeting memory lost in the haze of the past. If Henry desired her, he would need to take the step of making her his wife. It was a move so bold that it left the court in a daze. After all, the king was already in a committed relationship. His Queen Catherine was cherished by the people and ardently safeguarded by her nephew, the Holy Roman Emperor. The church would need to be challenged for Henry to pursue Anne. But Anne remained still. She had resided in the courts of Europe, where queens exercised gentle influence from behind delicate lace fans and artfully crafted smiles. She understood that ambition could be a perilous pursuit, yet it was one she was determined to conquer. Standing in the softly lit halls of the English court, Anne Boleyn made her choice not to be merely admired, but to change her destiny, and England's forever. What started as a playful exchange between King Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn gradually unfolded into a significant national dilemma. Henry was completely entranced. He was consumed by his fixation, and in that fixation, he was prepared to dismantle everything England had understood for ages. The king's wish to wed Anne encountered a minor obstacle. Specifically, he was already wed to Queen Catherine of Aragon. Catherine, calm and unwavering, chose not to fade into the background. She had been Henry's devoted wife for 20 years, and in the sight of God and the English people, she was the true queen. Divorce felt not only shocking, but also nearly unimaginable. But Henry was resolute. He assured himself and attempted to persuade others that his union with Catherine was doomed due to her previous marriage to his brother Arthur. Forget that the Pope had given special permission for their union years ago. Henry now insisted that his soul was in peril unless he annulled the marriage. Anne, for her part, understood the importance of maintaining a calm demeanor. She lingered just beyond his grasp, playfully lifting Henry's spirits while keeping herself at a comfortable distance. Each look, each word felt deliberate. She wasn't just looking for marriage. She was setting herself up to be the Queen of England. The court drifted into murmurs and small groups. Some noble families gently sought Anne's favor, sensing the subtle shifts in power. Others held on tightly to Queen Catherine, filled with dread at the thought of Anne taking her place. Diplomats penned urgent letters back to Rome, while foreign monarchs issued warnings of consequences. Henry's own advisors shifted with a languid air, sensing the ground subtly quaking beneath them. As months drifted into years, Henry's frustration lingered. He inundated the Pope with requests, orchestrated his lawyers to uncover loopholes, and gradually came to understand that the Church would not yield easily. Catherine had influential supporters, including her nephew, Emperor Charles V, the most dominant figure in Europe. Yet Henry continued ignoring council customs and gradually the regulations as well. His courtship with Anne had transformed into something much more profound than mere personal longing. It had become a test for the fundamental framework of England's political and religious existence. Anne was gently weaving her way into a king's heart. She was slowly pulling an entire kingdom into uncharted waters. A perilous game had commenced, and retreat was not an option. After nearly 7 long years of navigating through turmoil, scandal, and diplomatic chaos, Anne Boleyn's gamble finally bore fruit. In January 1533, she quietly entered into marriage with Henry VIII, a daring decision considering he was still officially wed to Catherine of Aragon in the view of the Pope and much of Europe. By June, Anne was crowned Queen of England in a grand ceremony at Westminster Abbey. It should have been the crowning moment of her life, but the atmosphere felt heavy and languid, lacking the vibrant energy one would expect. The people of London observed with heavy eyelids. Some cheered softly, while others whispered prayers for Queen Catherine. Many pondered whether this new queen, with her French manners and bold spirit, was a gift or a burden. Anne stepped into her role not as a cherished leader, but as a whirlwind. In contrast to Catherine, who represented the classic English ideals of modesty and devotion, Anne was striking bold and astutely aware of the political landscape. She wore bold colors, commanded the court with sharp intelligence, and made powerful enemies with a languid grace. Her position, though appearing stable, was also unsettlingly fragile. Everything lay in a gentle hush, focused on one thing: granting Henry a male heir. Anne was acutely aware of this, just like everyone else. She was no longer just Henry's lover. She had become the promise of a future. Early in her pregnancy, Anne and Henry were overjoyed, convinced that the child would be a boy. In September 1533, Anne welcomed a daughter into the world, naming her Elizabeth. To Anne's credit, she concealed her deep disappointment with poise, assuring everyone that the next child would undoubtedly be a boy. Henry, on the other hand, seemed a bit more drowsy, his eyes once bright with affection, now dimmed with uncertainty. For a while, Anne's star shone with a gentle glow. She transformed the English court to reflect her vision, raising her family to extraordinary levels, and becoming the first queen in English history to be anointed with the sacred oil typically reserved for kings. Her influence was extensive. Foreign ambassadors sought her favor, and courtiers rearranged alliances to remain in her good graces. The once compliant Henry started to steer England officially away from Rome, establishing the Church of England with himself at its helm, all to ensure that Anne's crown remained unchallenged. Yet even in her triumph, a gentle haze began to settle in. Friends murmured softly, rivals lingered nearby, biding their time. And Henry, ever so changeable and uneasy, was already starting to gaze past the dazzling woman who had transformed the kingdom for him. Anne had won the throne, but maintaining it would require more than just charm, ambition, or even love. Anne Boleyn had ascended to heights that few women of her era could even dream of. But the higher you ascend, the more challenging the descent. Almost from the moment she placed the crown on her head, the flaws in her world started to reveal themselves. At the center of Anne's challenges was the weight of expectation to bear a son. Her first child, Elizabeth, while vibrant and well, was not the son Henry the Faithful had pinned his dynastic aspirations on. And the clock was gently ticking away. Anne experienced several pregnancies in a short span, but sorrow ensued with losses that left her physically drained and emotionally bruised. Each lost child slowly eroded the sturdy base she had carefully constructed. Henry, once deeply engaged, started to drift, his discontent creating distance between them. Anne, always vocal, insisted, pleaded, and struggled to maintain her position. But Henry, a man who valued compliance as much as allure, became weary of her edge, her resistance, and the very spark that had once captivated him. Outside the royal chambers, foes were assembling quietly, their presence looming like shadows in the night. Numerous nobles who had endured Anne's ascent with clenched jaws now conspicuously plotted her demise. Catherine of Aragon's supporters always held a grudge against Anne for what they perceived as an act of theft and sacrilege. Even commoners murmured about her, labeling her the great whore, attributing the schism with Rome and the burdensome changes that ensued to her influence. And then arrived Jane Seymour. Softly, subtly, everything Anne was not Jane drew Henry's drifting gaze just as Anne's hold began to fade. Where Anne had captivated him with her brilliance and challenge, Jane provided a gentle sense of ease. It was a perilous shift, and Anne, ever so aware, noticed it unfolding. She attempted to regain her standing, showering Henry with affection, vowing to bear more sons, pleading for understanding. Yet the king, ever capricious, had already started envisioning a future without the woman for whom he had once shattered a kingdom. Anne's political enemies, including Thomas Cromwell, who was once her ally, felt the shift in the atmosphere. They started to softly build the foundation for a campaign of chaos, gently collecting whispers, tales, and testimonies. The woman who had navigated the perilous game of ambition with such skill was now faltering. Anne had claimed her crown with cleverness and bravery. Yet, in the relentless, ever-changing realm of Henry's court, former triumphs held little significance. Only new triumphs counted, and Anne's adversaries were getting ready for battle. The queen who had broken a realm would soon discover how swiftly a realm could break her. Anne Boleyn's foes didn't confront her with battalions or blades. They arrived with soft murmurs, hidden truths, and delicately honed deceptions. In the back rooms of court betrayal lingered quiet, unhurried, and ominous. Thomas Cromwell, who was once Anne's most devoted supporter during the English Reformation, had now shifted his allegiance away from her. Their alliance had been formed from shared aspirations, yet now their interests were at odds. Anne desired changes to assist those in need and curtail the influence of avaricious nobles. Cromwell sought calmness, approval from Henry, and a lack of disruption. Anne's boldness had turned her into a threat, and in Henry's ever-changing heart, love had soured into annoyance, doubt, and a chilling distance. Anne found herself with only a handful of genuine friends remaining. Even her charm, once her greatest weapon, now felt heavy against the court's desire for a softer, more yielding queen. And Jane Seymour, calm and composed, lingered just out of view, the ideal counterpoint to Anne's dwindling spark. Cromwell was the one who made the first move. Understanding Henry's unease, aware that the king sought an escape, yet had no suitable reason, Cromwell proposed a remedy. What if Anne could be eliminated, not through divorce, which would bring shame to Henry, but through scandal? The accusations were bizarre, almost nightmarish: adultery, incest, conspiracy against the king. Anne, the once magnificent queen, now cast in shadows, a figure of betrayal, allure, and danger to the crown she had so brilliantly reshaped. Cromwell slowly gathered evidence, gently coaxing confessions through pressure, transforming courtly flirtations into incriminating testimony. A number of men, among them Anne's brother George Boleyn, were taken into custody. The charges felt rather confusing. They were filled with contradictions and impossibilities. Yet, in Henry's court, reality was shaped by the whims of the king. Anne, feeling the weight of the moment, struggled with all her might. She gently called upon Henry's recollections to the affection they had once known. But it was futile. The man who had once shattered England for her now turned away, unable to meet her gaze. In May 1536, Anne was taken to the Tower of London after her arrest. As the great gate slammed shut behind her, a heavy realization settled in her mind. She had lost her regal status. She was a captive, a piece caught in the harsh game she had once navigated with such skill. Deceit had determined her destiny. And now, in the stillness of the tower, Anne Boleyn lingered, awaiting the inevitable turn of events. Anne Boleyn stood in the great hall of the Tower of London, facing a tribunal of nobles, many of whom owed their very titles and fortunes to her assent. Now they sat in judgment, heavy-lidded and watchful, prepared to erase the woman who had once changed the destiny of England. The accusations leveled at her were quite surprising. Infidelity involving several men, including her own brother, George Boleyn. Serious betrayal. Whispers of betrayal against the ruler. In a different realm, it would have been unimaginable to level such charges against a queen. But here now, they were just a performance. A lackluster performance crafted to fulfill Henry VIII's every desire. Anne's downfall shrouded in a delicate layer of legality. Anne stood her ground with the same passion that had once captivated Henry. She dismissed every accusation with a calm clarity, a steady focus, and a serene demeanor that surprised even her adversaries. She gently reminded them that she had been crowned with sacred oil chosen by God and anointed as Queen of England. She gently reminded them of her loyalty, her sacrifices, her love. But it was all in vain. The verdict had been settled long before Anne even entered the courtroom. The trial unfolded as a grand display for the court and the public, a slow unraveling of a woman who once seemed invincible. One after another, voices emerged, some influenced or enticed, sharing heavy accusations. Dates and places seemed to be at odds with one another. The evidence was weak, if it was even present. Yet the reality seemed to fade away at this moment. Anne was found guilty, drifting into a quiet acceptance of the verdict. Her brother George and the other men charged alongside her received the same fate of death. Anne was to face execution by beheading, a more gentle fate than the typical punishment for traitors, which involved hanging, drawing, and quartering. When the verdict was read, Anne remained still and composed. She stood tall, her face pale, yet her spirit remained unwavering. In those last moments before returning to her cell, she spoke with clarity, expressing her readiness to face death, and prayed for God's mercy upon her soul. As the heavy doors of the hall closed behind her, the court let out a soft sigh of relief. The storm Anne had been remarkable, perilous, and unforgettable was almost at its end. But even then they remained unaware. They were not removing Anne Boleyn. They were capturing her essence in treachery, in sorrow, and in myth. After her trial, Anne Boleyn was returned to the Tower of London, not as the victorious queen who had once commanded England, but as a weary prisoner awaiting her fate. Yet even in the twilight of her journey, Anne refused to falter. In the dim, quiet halls of the tower, Anne readied herself. She lingered in prayer, kneeling on the hard stone floors, her hands clasped, gently, her voice soft and calm. She quietly admitted to no wrongdoings, as she felt she had done nothing amiss. She expressed no fear of death, stating instead her hope that it would usher in peace for the kingdom, and perhaps grant mercy to her beloved daughter Elizabeth. Her ladies-in-waiting, those few who had remained faithful quietly, shed tears in solitude. Anne offered them solace rather than receiving it herself. She made dry jokes occasionally, suggesting that she would be remembered as a queen who had lost her head. In her dark humor lay the unwavering spark that rendered her unforgettable. Henry VIII, in contrast, displayed an unwavering resolve. He had already shifted his focus to Jane Seymour. Even before Anne's execution date was set, Henry was already planning his next marriage. For Anne, this final betrayal from the man who had once torn down a kingdom for her must have felt like a heavy weight on her heart. On May 18th, 1536, Anne received the news that she would meet her end the following morning. She dozed off for only a short while that night. Instead, she spent her final hours in quiet reflection, seeking solace in prayer, asking for forgiveness for all who had wronged her, and perhaps for herself, for the ambition and pride that had brought her to this moment. Henry, with a gentle touch of royal grace, had arranged for a French swordsman to carry out the execution, quicker, smoother, less harsh than an axe. It was a slight relief, perhaps more for the king's peace of mind than for Anne's ease. As the first light of day broke, Anne donned her attire with a gentle grace, a dark gray gown of damask, adorned with fur, a crimson kirtle, underneath hues that spoke of honor and solemnity. She pinned up her dark hair and tucked it beneath a simple cap, prepared to meet the blade with a calm demeanor. As the tower's chilly morning mist wrapped around the courtyard stones, Anne Boleyn, queen, mother, survivor, fighter, stepped forward. There would be no tears, no pleas, just a quiet moment of bravery in the presence of history's gaze. Her end was near, yet her story was only just starting to unfold. On the morning of May 19th, 1536, Anne Boleyn quietly ascended the scaffold built within the Tower of London's walls. A small crowd gathered, courtiers, guards, a few witnesses, all enveloped in a tranquil hush, as if even the stone walls were in a state of quiet repose. Anne stood tall, her gray gown gently swaying in the cool morning breeze. She appeared more delicate than she had at court, her complexion wan yet serene. There were no outbursts, no shattered cries. If anything, she confronted death with a calm grace that had once brought a kingdom to its knees. She spoke softly, thoughtfully, selecting her last words. She remained silent, neither blaming nor justifying her actions. She quietly wished for the king's well-being and success, the same man who had left her behind. In those final moments, Anne bestowed upon the world not a confession, but a gentle gift of forgiveness. Her courage surprised even those who had gathered to witness her downfall. The French executioner, summoned to guarantee a quick end, moved ahead. Anne knelt upright, her hands gently clasped in prayer, her eyes softly gazing toward the heavens. A delicate white cloth was gently wrapped around her eyes. She stayed motionless. The sword gleamed briefly, quiet and quick, and Anne Boleyn, Queen, Mother, History Maker, ceased to exist. She was laid to rest swiftly in an unmarked grave, within the tower grounds, placed in an arrow chest, as no proper coffin had been arranged for her. A queen once adorned in gold, now fading away in silence. Yet Anne's tale didn't conclude in that chilly resting place. Her daughter Elizabeth, the child whose birth had once disappointed a king, would eventually awaken to become one of the greatest monarchs in English history. Elizabeth the Pfizer, the Virgin Queen, whose reign would witness the blossoming of English art power and global influence. A queen who carries her mother's fierce spirit, sharp mind, and unwavering strength within her. Anne Boleyn altered the trajectory of England for all time. Her ambition played a crucial role in the separation from Rome and the establishment of the Church of England. Her fall revealed to everyone that even those in power could be overlooked. Yet through her blood, through Elizabeth Anne's legacy, glimmered softly, more radiant than any crown she had worn in life. Ultimately, Anne Boleyn achieved a form of everlasting presence, not by enduring, but through her unforgettable influence on history. By the early 1770s, the American colonies were in a state of quiet unrest, much like a pot that had been left unattended on the stove. The connection with Britain, which was once viewed with admiration, has now turned into feelings of bitterness, distrust, and escalating anger. It didn't begin with tea. Years earlier, the Stamp Act had stirred up discontent among colonists by imposing taxes on everything from newspapers to playing cards. Next came the Townshend Acts, which imposed taxes on basic items such as paper glass and paint. Every new law enacted far away by a parliament in which the colonists had no voice felt like another spark falling onto parched ground. Initially, the frustration manifested through courteous requests and passionate leaflets. Colonial assemblies put together official protests. Merchants arranged boycotts. Writers such as Samuel Adams and John Dickinson contributed to newspapers with fervent discussions about freedom and entitlements. But as time passed, irritation settled into a heavier feeling, a gradual understanding that Britain was not paying attention. Unfortunately, Britain seemed indifferent. Many colonists held on to the belief that if they simply created enough commotion, if they just argued passionately enough, Parliament would eventually withdraw the taxes. And at times, they certainly did. The Stamp Act was ultimately rescinded following significant colonial outcry. Yet, each little triumph was met with fresh laws, additional taxes, and new jabs. It wasn't about the money, really. It truly never was. The taxes were quite unassuming when compared to British norms. The principle was what truly upset the colonists. They were being burdened without agreement, regarded as subjects, instead of citizens governed like far-off possessions rather than collaborators. Boston, unlike any other city, emerged as the core of defiance. The Sons of Liberty, a clandestine and passionate assembly of patriots, became increasingly vocal and daring. In 1770, tensions erupted into chaos when British soldiers opened fire on unarmed civilians in an event that would come to be known as the Boston Massacre. Crimson had already seeped into the cobblestones. Faith in others had faded away. By 1773, the colonies were drifting on the brink. A last affront would push them into blatant rebellion, and it arrived not as soldiers or new laws or armies, but in the gentle, unassuming form of crates piled high with tea. The colonists were unaware, but on that night when tea drifted in the chilly waters of Boston Harbor, everything would shift forever. In 1773, Parliament made a significant error in judgment. Thinking the American colonies would passively embrace the lower-priced tea, they enacted the Tea Act, a measure intended to rescue the faltering British East India Company, and by the way, reaffirm Britain's authority to impose taxes on the colonies. On paper, it seemed like a decent arrangement. The Tea Act enabled the company to sell tea straight to the colonies, eliminating intermediaries, reducing prices, and providing a luxury item at an affordable rate. A couple of cents less, what could possibly go awry, all things. Because the issue wasn't the cost of tea, it was the underlying principle. The Tea Act kept the despised tax on tea firmly established. Taking the tea even with a price reduction would imply recognizing Parliament's authority to impose taxes on the colonies without their agreement. For numerous Americans, that felt unimaginable, a relinquishment of the freedoms they had battled to safeguard for over 10 years. The news of the Tea Act drifted slowly through the colonies. Merchants sighed. They noticed their livelihoods at risk from a monopoly that would stifle local trade. Patriots quietly simmered at the hidden message. The Crown remained convinced it could act without restraint. In Boston, the response was particularly intense, already a city marked by the Boston Massacre and years of economic struggle. Bostonians saw the Tea Act for what it truly was, a snare cloaked as a deal. Declining the tea turned into a question of pride, a true measure of devotion to the fight for freedom. Public meetings grew in number. Newspaper columns drifted with a gentle haze of rhetoric. Groups such as the Sons of Liberty, under the leadership of Samuel Adams and others, coordinated boycotts pledging that no tea from the East India Company would be unloaded, sold, or consumed on American soil. Throughout the colonies, vessels laden with the contentious tea were gently dismissed by local opposition. In ports from New York to Charleston, the message was unmistakably conveyed. We will not be swayed. But in Boston, destiny took an unexpected turn. 3 ships, the Dartmouth, the Eleanor, and the Beaver, arrived anchored in the harbor and lingered there, seemingly reluctant to depart. Royal officials urged that the tea be unloaded. The colonists declined. A stalemate tightened like a bowstring pulled to its limit. The tension was overwhelming. A solitary action could shatter it, and the course of history would be forever altered. As the British tea ships lingered in Boston Harbor, the city itself became a tense and volatile place. With each passing day, the unease grew heavier, wrapping around everything like a thick fog. Boston wasn't merely holding back. It was gearing up for a showdown. In taverns, churches, and public squares, weary colonists murmured about what to do. The Sons of Liberty, guided by passionate figures such as Samuel Adams, John Hancock, and Paul Revere, took prompt action to coordinate their opposition. They shared public announcements urging people to avoid British tea and organized lively gatherings that filled with farmers, artisans, and merchants together. Each gathering made the warmth grow stronger. The Old South Meeting House emerged as the focal point of the resistance. Thousands filled the wooden hall, their breath creating a mist, their voices lifting in resistance. Here, resolutions were passed, speeches were made, and tempers simmered. Every vote opposing the unloading of tea felt like another heavy weight against British authority. But as the folks in Boston remained together, time was slowly slipping away. British law required that imported goods such as tea be unloaded and the tax settled within 20 days. If the ships lingered past the deadline, customs officials would confiscate the cargo and the tax would be enforced with determination. The Sons of Liberty realized that once the tax was settled, even if begrudgingly, the fundamental principle would fade away. It wasn't merely about the tea anymore. It was about whether the colonies would quietly accept being treated as subjects without rights, or whether they would muster the energy to stand and fight for their future. Meanwhile, the Royal Governor of Massachusetts, Thomas Hutchinson, settled in with a sense of unwavering resolve. He insisted that the tea ships remain docked until their cargo was unloaded, insisting on adherence to the law, regardless of the colonial uproar. For him, yielding would signify that the unruly masses, rather than the sovereigns, held sway over the colonies. Boston's standoff turned into quite the show. Every man, woman, and child felt a heavy sense of anticipation in the air. You could sense it in the atmosphere, that crisp, tense feeling before a storm when everything seems to pause. Just a single spark could set off a tremendous blast, and somewhere, among the bustling streets and weary souls of Boston, a decision was gently forming a plan that would resonate across oceans and empires. December 16, 1773, began with a dull and chilly light over Boston, a city teetering on the brink of change. For nearly 3 weeks, the tea ships had lingered in the harbor, quietly waiting, as if time itself had slowed down. At last, the ultimate deadline had come. British law required that the tea be unloaded and the tax settled within 20 days of a ship's arrival. If it weren't the case, customs officials might take the cargo, and British troops could be summoned to uphold the law. It was common knowledge. Everyone was aware of the importance of the situation. If the tea arrived on land, the main idea was forgotten. If the colonists permitted it, even for a moment, their cause, their assertion of rights and freedom, would begin to fall apart. That morning, a multitude of Bostonians and nearby colonists gathered in the Old South Meeting House, the largest building in town. Some had trudged for miles through the frosty countryside to arrive. The meeting was so crowded that men spilled out into the streets, trying to catch the passionate speeches drifting through the air. Samuel Adams, the steadfast voice of dissent, led the assembly. One by one, speakers stood up to condemn the Tea Act, to voice their opposition to oppression, and to call for prompt action. But even among the defiants, a thick haze of uncertainty lingered. What actions could be taken to avoid igniting a full-blown conflict? How could they halt the tea without unleashing a wave of harsh consequences? As the afternoon drifted by, riders ambled in with somber news. Governor Thomas Hutchinson stayed resolute. The ships would have to stay put until they had emptied their cargo. The tea would be taken, the tax gathered, the king's decree upheld. The crowd murmured with discontent. The walls of the meeting house appeared to tremble gently with the weight of it. Yet Samuel Adams stood with a serene demeanor and articulated the words that marked the conclusion of discussion. This meeting seems unlikely to bring any significant change for the country. A straightforward statement. But everyone was aware of its significance. There would be no more requests, no more agreements. Action will be taken. Outside, a war whoop drifted softly through the encroaching shadows, the signal. Men hurriedly transformed their appearances, applying dark smudges to their faces and wrapping themselves in blankets and feathers, attempting a rough mimicry of Mohawk warriors. It wasn't about deceiving anyone. It was about crafting a symbol, a message that would be unmistakable to all. The deadline had come and gone. Boston would respond not with words, but with a quiet determination. As twilight deepened over Boston on December 16, 1773, the calm streets began to awaken. Figures drifted through the shadows. Common men wrapped in tattered blankets, their faces smudged with grime, a few decorated with feathers. They weren't attempting to deceive anyone into thinking they were genuine Mohawks. Their disguise was symbolic, an act of shedding their old identities, of taking a stand as something new, something bold. In a slow, unhurried manner, they drifted towards Griffin's Wharf, where the 3 tea ships, the Dartmouth, the Eleanor, and the Beaver, rested peacefully at anchor. The harbor waters swirled deep and frigid below them, heavy with the crispness of the winter breeze. It was quiet, calm, and serene. This was not a disturbance. It was a mission executed with a serene, unwavering focus. With hatchets and clubs in hand, the disguised colonists quietly approached the ships, easily overpowering the few crew members who remained on board. The sailors were unharmed. They were gently set aside, observed quietly, as the operation commenced. Men gently pried open the wooden chests, with careful strikes, the soothing aroma of fresh tea wafting into the chilly night air. Others lazily tossed the crates overboard, their heavy splashes gently breaking the calm surface of the harbor. Chest after chest, 342 in total, was broken and dumped until the dark water swirled with thousands of pounds of tea leaves. Spectators watched from the wharf, quiet, mesmerized. British guards stationed nearby remained completely still, showing no signs of intervention. It's hard to tell if it's due to confusion, sympathy, or a worry about things getting out of hand. Some accounts hint that even among British loyalists there was a certain awareness. Something had changed, and it was inevitable this evening. The discipline was remarkable. No cargo was taken. No one disturbed the ships for treasures. Only the tea, the despised emblem of British control, was singled out. In a town where hunger and hardship were daily realities, the men could have easily turned the protest into a reason for taking what wasn't theirs. They certainly did not. When it was over, the harbor looked like a vast, swirling cauldron, filled with torn chests and soaking tea leaves. The aroma of the ocean blended with the zesty essence of crushed tea, enveloping the evening atmosphere in a peculiar, bittersweet fragrance. The task was completed. Quietly, the men slipped away into the night, fading into the shadows of Boston's alleys and back streets. They departed without leaving any names, leaders or claims to fame, just the undeniable imprint of change. As the last broken crates floated gently in the dim water, Boston remained motionless, seemingly pausing in time. The Boston Tea Party was neither a riot, nor a brawl, nor a drunken spectacle. It was something far rarer, an act of cold, deliberate defiance, carried out under the gentle embrace of night. The harbor was transformed into a giant, swirling teapot, gently lulling the senses with its serene presence. Countless pounds of East India Company tea drifted lazily on the water's surface, casting a dark hue over it. Some colonists, feeling drowsy and defiant, scooped handfuls of soaked leaves from the harbor, only to be chastised by the Sons of Liberty patrolling the docks. No remnants could be recovered. This evening's efforts will yield no rewards for anyone. This was straightforward, clear, and uncomplicated. The town stirred the next morning to the aroma of salty tea lingering lazily in the air. News drifted slowly, carried by whispers, penned notes, and the occasional printed sheet. By midday, all from apprentices to merchants were aware of the events, and opinions quickly diverged. Among patriots, there was a gentle, lingering sense of pride, a soft, comforting pride that ordinary men had quietly stood up to the mightiest empire in the world and made a subtle impact for liberty. Among loyalists and moderates, there was a deep sense of unease. To them, the destruction of property felt careless and risky. Had the colonies stepped over a threshold they couldn't return from, Governor Thomas Hutchinson simmered in his mansion, feeling a heavy weight of frustration not only from the destruction, but also from the implications it carried. If the king's authority could be challenged so openly in Boston, where else could unrest ignite? British officials were taken aback. They had anticipated some unrest, perhaps some boycotts, or even another disturbance similar to those that had erupted over the Stamp Act. They hadn't anticipated that methodical, composed revolutionaries would quietly dismantle tens of thousands of pounds of royal property without even shattering a window. The ship's captains, the Dartmouth, the Eleanor, the Beaver, could only gaze with heavy eyes as their cargo slipped away into the depths below. In the official ledgers, the night's loss would be recorded at over 10,000 British pounds. Quite a sum indeed. But the true loss wasn't counted in pounds sterling or spoiled tea. It was gauged in faith and devotion in the delicate mirage that Britain continued to govern her colonies with agreement. The night the tea sank, something deeper floated gently to the surface, a shared, undeniable truth. The era of calm demonstrations was drawing to a close, a moment of truth was approaching, and Boston was prepared. As news of the Boston Tea Party drifted across the Atlantic and arrived in London, the response was immediate and intense. To British officials, it was more than just a protest. It was a rebellion, a bold and defiant challenge to royal authority that demanded attention. King George III, upon hearing the news, was said to have become quite still with fury. Parliament, weighed down by years of colonial disobedience, stirred with a sense of exasperation. They sought retribution not merely for the city of Boston, but as a cautionary tale for all the American colonies. The outcome was a collection of regulations so severe, they swiftly earned the title of the Intolerable Acts in America. The initial strike arrived quickly, the Boston Port Act. In a sudden and harsh decision, Parliament mandated the shutdown of Boston's lively harbor, the city's vital economic artery, until compensation for the ruined tea was settled. And calm has returned. Ships were unable to come or go. Trade faded away, and goods and supplies dwindled. Boston, once bustling and lively, settled into a hushed calm, its docks hauntingly tranquil. Yet the consequences continued beyond that. The Massachusetts Government Act took away the colony's ability to govern itself, putting it directly under the control of officials chosen by the king. The Administration of Justice Act permitted royal officials facing criminal accusations to be tried in Britain, sending a clear signal that British authorities were beyond reproach. To ensure the colony's new force was a possibility, British soldiers were stationed throughout Boston, residing among the very citizens they were intended to control. The message was unmistakable. Rebellion would be subdued. Liberty had become a burden the Crown could no longer endure. But Parliament's heavy hand had a rather drowsy effect. Rather than instilling fear in the other colonies to force their compliance, it sparked their anger. News of Boston's plight with its port shut down and its citizens enduring hardship under martial law evoked profound compassion and just indignation across the nation. Wagon loads of food and supplies drifted into Boston from neighboring colonies. Letters of support, pledges of unity, and secret meetings started to gently draw the once fragmented colonies closer together. What had once been a Massachusetts issue was slowly turning into a national concern. In dealing harshly with Boston, Britain aimed to set a precedent. Instead, they turned Boston into a symbol, a rallying cry for defiance. The flames of change, once dimly glowing in scattered places, now started to glow warmly from one colony to another. And there would be no simple way to put them out. The punishment of Boston stirred ripples that extended well beyond the rugged coastline of Massachusetts. Throughout the 13 colonies, discontent simmered, evolving into a more perilous situation for Britain: harmony. For years, the colonies had behaved like far-off relatives, squabbling and vying against one another, divided by distance, faith, and economic competition. But when Parliament closed Boston's harbor and took away Massachusetts' self-governance, people all over the continent understood that if it could happen to Boston, it could happen to anyone. From Virginia to Pennsylvania, South Carolina to New Hampshire, the response was gentle and unhurried. Colonists sent wagons filled with food supplies and letters of support to the struggling people of Boston. Town meetings droned on with frustration. Newspaper printers toiled endlessly, their efforts stretching from dawn until dusk to share the latest updates. The struggle was no longer Boston's to bear by itself. It belonged to all. And so in September 1774, something remarkable unfolded. The First Continental Congress gathered in Philadelphia. For the first time, representatives from 12 of the 13 colonies came together in a single space to talk about a collective reaction. Men such as George Washington, Patrick Henry John Adams, and Samuel Adams, once just local figures, now united as the builders of a movement that was expanding with each passing moment. Their aim, at least on the surface, was not quite complete autonomy. Most remained quietly optimistic for a resolution, yearning for a revival of the previous bond of mutual respect beneath the British Crown. Yet, under the surface of courteous discussions and thoughtfully crafted requests, a more profound awareness was beginning to emerge. The colonies could no longer manage to remain apart. At the Congress, they came to a consensus on a comprehensive boycott of British goods. They promised to stand by each other against any additional British hostility, clearly stating that any assault on one colony would be viewed as an assault on all. In taverns and meeting houses across the continent, ordinary people started to share words that had previously been murmured only in hushed tones. harmony, strength, freedom. In bringing the hammer down on Boston, Britain had envisioned it would extinguish dissent. Instead, it had fused the colonies into something much more perilous, a populace, who, despite their distinctions, were starting to see themselves not as isolated territories, but as Americans. The winds of change were gently whispering. They were coming together like a heavy cloud, and it was too late for Britain to change the course. The evening the tea descended into Boston Harbor, it wasn't merely crates that met their end. It was the notion that the American colonies could stay devoted subjects indefinitely. The Boston Tea Party ignited a flame that no ruler, no military force, no far-off assembly could ever extinguish. In the months that followed, that spark slowly ignited across the colonies. What had once been protests, boycotts, and polite petitions gradually transformed into open resistance. Town militias started practicing openly, while storehouses brimmed with powder and shot. Men who had once raised their glasses to King George III in taverns now murmured about revolution beneath the same roofs. Boston emerged as a representation of endurance, weary yet resolute. The more Britain attempted to assert control, the more the colonies gently drifted away. Every ship that drifted by the still quiet harbor of Boston was a gentle reminder that oppression had encountered its equal in American resistance. When Parliament enacted the Intolerable Acts, their aim was to set a precedent with Boston, hoping to instill fear in the other colonies and compel them to comply. Instead, they had formed a city of sacrifice, a call to unite. From Georgia to New Hampshire, colonists began to understand that their destinies were intertwined. Resistance had shifted away from its previous focus. It was about survival, identity, freedom. By the spring of 1775, the tension simmered just beneath the surface outside Boston in the villages of Lexington and Concord. British troops dispatched to seize colonial weapons unexpectedly encountered armed farmers, everyday individuals prepared to protect their rights with musket fire. The initial echoes of the American Revolution resounded a clear connection drawn back to the instant when individuals prioritized ideals over wealth and cast a treasure trove of tea into the harbor. The Boston Tea Party quietly demonstrated that revolution can unfold without grand proclamations or fanfare. At times, it begins softly with a few resolute individuals braving the chill, opting for defiance instead of trepidation. In discarding the tea, the colonists were not merely opposing attacks. They were turning away from an empire. And even though the path forward seemed fraught with challenges, confusion, and turmoil, one realization had settled in that evening by the water in Boston Harbor. The American colonies had drifted away from their allegiance. They were an unfamiliar presence, an unsettling threat. They were visionaries, and they were only beginning everything. Before the towering pyramids of Giza, before Mesopotamian cities buzzed with life, before Stonehenge stood against the sky, there was Corral, a place that seems to linger in a gentle haze of time. Nestled in the arid valleys of coastal Peru, Corral emerged in quiet grandeur almost 5,000 years ago, only to gradually slip into near total obscurity, engulfed by sands and lost to the annals of time. For ages, the world remained blissfully unaware of its existence. The super valley where Corral once thrived appears at first glance to be an unexpected setting for civilization to flourish. The landscape is quiet still, the river a delicate silver line, meandering through the dry rocks and dust. To most eyes, it appeared unwelcoming, a realm forsaken by vitality. Yet it was here in the stillness that one of humanity's earliest great cities took shape. Corral was more than just a cluster of scattered huts or a fleeting trading post. It was a carefully designed city stretching across 150 acres, dotted with pyramids, plazas, homes, and spaces for ceremonies. It had scale, purpose, and vision, a complex society gently unfolding centuries before the Egyptians began stacking stones into pyramids of their own. The inhabitants of Corral accomplished this without the wheel, without written language, and without metal tools. They constructed enormous edifices from stone and earth, using only creativity, collective effort, and the sheer force of human determination. For countless years, the existence of Corral was kept hidden away. Even when travelers wandered through the valley, they barely noticed the peculiar, weathered mounds scattered about, thinking them to be just natural formations, simple hills shaped by the gentle desert winds. It was hard to believe that hidden beneath the sand was one of the world's oldest cities existing long before the civilizations that history books had celebrated as the pioneers. It wasn't until the late 20th century that archaeologists, guided by Ruth Shady, revealed the truth. What they uncovered hidden beneath the layers of history would change the narrative of the Americas and compel the world to rethink its understanding of the origins of civilization itself. Corral had emerged, thrived, and faded away in complete obscurity. Now, after ages of quiet, its stones are murmuring once more, sharing tales of a serene, wise people who crafted a realm of intricacy and marvel in a place where existence itself appeared unlikely. And this was just the start of their tale. At first glance, the Supi Valley appears to be a realm where existence seems to drift in a languid manner. Gentle breezes drift over vast expanses of sand and stone. The sun hangs heavy in the sky, its warmth enveloping everything, turning the earth into parched, fragile layers. Water is scarce, the river, a gentle winding line, struggling to persist. To the untrained eye, it appears as a desolate expanse, devoid of life, overlooked by the divine. Yet the inhabitants of Corral perceived something else entirely. They did not perceive a barren expanse to be dreaded. They noticed a canvas waiting to be molded. They acknowledged the river, however humble, as the essence of potential. And so, with a gentle persistence, creativity, and quiet resolve, they transformed this harsh environment into a serene haven of life and culture. Their initial triumph was in farming. They mastered the art of managing the river's seasonal floods, creating straightforward yet ingenious irrigation systems that directed water throughout the valley floor. Where others noticed barren land, they nurtured tender signs of life. Cotton beans, squash, guava, sweet potatoes. Cotton in particular turned into their cherished find. It was woven into fishing nets and textiles, nurturing trade with coastal villages and forming connections that extended far beyond their arid homeland. Yet cultivating crops was merely a fraction of their expertise. The inhabitants of Corral recognized that thriving in the desert demanded a sense of harmony. They collaborated with nature, embracing its rhythms and flow. They constructed their dwellings and gathering places from stone and earth, crafted to endure the intense heat and the infrequent harsh rains that sometimes pass through the valley. They observed the stars and seasons, organizing their harvests with the meticulousness of expert astronomers. Trade flowed through Corral's economy like a gentle, soothing rhythm. Dried fish, cotton, fruits, and handmade goods drifted gently along the coast. In return, Corral obtained unique items, vibrant shells from the Pacific, precious stones from the Andes, and concepts from far-off cultures. They were not alone. They shared a bond. In a land where survival felt like a distant dream, Corral flourished through cleverness, creativity, and a strong sense of togetherness. They didn't overcome the desert with sheer strength. They collaborated with it, attuning to its rhythms, honoring its strength, creating a society that was more than merely functional. It was quite remarkable. Against the odds, Corral slowly emerged as a gentle light of civilization. And it was just starting to lift. Emerging from the desert like timeless sentinels, the pyramids of Corral challenge our understanding of early civilization in the Americas. These were not insignificant rough constructions made by unrefined hands. They were grand intentional creations of architecture crafted by a people with foresight, structure, and aspiration. The focal point of the city was the Pyramid Mare, the grandest of Corral's monumental structures. It extended over 450 feet long and rose almost 60 feet above the desert floor, a remarkable achievement in engineering reminiscent of the early marvels of the ancient world. Constructed from stone mud and woven reed bags filled with rocks, the pyramid was crafted not only to survive the harsh climate, but also to endure the occasional earthquakes that shook the region. And it persisted quietly, withstanding the breeze and the passage of ages for almost 5,000 years. However, the pyramids of Corral were not intended as burial sites. In contrast to the grand burial structures of Egypt, Corral's pyramids had a distinct function. They were hubs of ritual authority and communal existence. Temples and gathering spaces adorned their peaks, reachable by wide, graceful staircases. Fires once flickered atop these platforms, and rituals were quietly held beneath the vast Peruvian sky. At the foot of the pyramids, expansive plazas lay open, sunken, and circular, gently beckoning thousands to come together for religious ceremonies, political meetings, and communal celebrations. The design of Corral's cityscape hinted at a society that valued community and order, a people closely intertwined with one another and the cosmos. Surrounding the pyramids, smaller residential complexes spread out, probably inhabited by priests, administrators, artisans, and farmers. The pyramids appear to have been thoughtfully positioned in harmony with celestial occurrences, sunrises, solstices, and the rhythms of the stars. To the people of Corral, architecture was more than just a practical endeavor. It held a deeper significance, intertwining the spiritual, mathematical, and cosmic realms. Strolling through the ancient stones today, there's an undeniable feeling of wonder that washes over you. These structures were built without metal tools, without the wheel, without any animals to help carry the load. Yet they rose with a gentle grace, a soft harmony, and a mesmerizing precision. The magnificent pyramids of Corral were neither constructed for conflict nor for battle. They were crafted to link the ground and the heavens, society and the universe, people and forever. And they continue to murmur through the dunes, sharing a tale that lingers in the air, undying. Among the ruins of Corral, there is an unmistakable quality, something that distinguishes it from countless ancient civilizations. No weapons lie hidden beneath its sands, no protective walls embrace its plazas, no mass graves suggest violent conquest or internal turmoil. In contrast to the empires that emerged and crumbled through conflict, Corral was a realm founded on tranquility. It's a surprising discovery that challenges what we thought we knew. Here was a civilization that thrived not through conflict, but through harmony, exchange, and common values. The inhabitants of Corral appear to have channeled their efforts into pursuits like architecture, astronomy, music, and the essence of community rather than focusing on military might or strongholds. Their plazas and pyramids were not symbols of triumph over foes. They were hubs of festivity, reverence, and administration. This was a civilization that preferred to come together instead of fighting to find common ground rather than cause harm. Trade was the essence of Corral's success. Cotton, nurtured by the gentle embrace of the fertile riverbanks, was delicately spun into fishing nets that found their way to coastal communities through trade. In exchange, Corral obtained dried fish, a vital source of nourishment, along with unique items from remote locations, vibrant shells from the Pacific, valuable stones from the highlands, and even uncommon tropical fruits from far-off valleys. This extensive network of trade connected the region, weaving distant communities into a harmonious tapestry of shared advantage. And in the center of it all, Corral gently flourished as a cultural and economic hub. Religious and ceremonial life was essential in fostering social harmony. The city's grand public spaces and sunken plazas probably acted as tranquil settings for rituals that brought the people together under common spiritual beliefs. Music enveloped these gatherings, flutes shaped from condor bones drums, crafted from deer hides, weaving soundscapes that drifted across the desert, connecting individual lives to something more profound. Leadership seemed to depend more on spiritual authority and civic organization rather than military strength. The city's leaders must have orchestrated extensive construction projects, seasonal farming rhythms, and intricate trade agreements, all while ensuring the remnants of conflict remained hidden. In a world steeped in ancient strife, Corral emerges as a gentle beacon, a soothing reminder that civilization can flourish without the weight of the vanquished. It can instead be built by the gentle strength of collaboration, creativity, and trust. At Corral, the stones gently resonate with whispers of a world long past. It was more than a city of structures and commerce. It was a place brimming with sound ritual and a soothing spiritual cadence. Music and ritual were intricately intertwined with the essence of Corral's civilization. Archaeologists, moving slowly through the dry sands, uncovered a treasure trove of ancient instruments, flutes crafted from the bones of condors and pelicans, whistles fashioned from deer antlers, small drums stretched with animal hides. These artifacts were not mere toys. They were meticulously crafted, finely tuned to specific notes, and designed to carry sound across the expansive plazas of the city. In a realm devoid of written words, melodies whispered the essence of the spirit. Picture it, the gentle pulse of drums echoing as twilight descends, flutes wailing softly like a whispering breeze, feet shuffling on the worn plazas as many congregate beneath the dimming glow. Fires would softly crackle atop the pyramid platforms. Priests, adorned in beautifully crafted garments, would softly chant to the deities of the river, the earth, the stars. In those moments, Corral was not merely a city, it was a gentle melody. The arrangement of Corral indicates that ceremonial life was central to its essence. The grand plazas were not just open spaces. They served as stages for communal ceremonies, thoughtfully crafted to bring people together. The sunken circular courts resembled ancient amphitheaters, drawing sound and sight to the rituals at their centers, while the pyramids towered above them all, not as tombs, but as sacred mountains crafted by human hands, connecting the earth to the heavens. Rituals probably signified the changing of the seasons, the rhythms of planting, and harvest, the dance of the stars. Music served as more than mere entertainment. It connected individuals, linked nature with the divine, and bridged the gap between the familiar and the enigmatic realms beyond. No aggressive murals, no frightening deities of conflict, no gruesome offerings. In Corral, the spiritual world appears to embody a sense of tranquility, joy, and deep respect. Even today, as the gentle desert breeze whispers through the ruins, you can almost feel it. The soft echoes of old melodies, the lost tunes of a culture that discovered beauty, significance, and unity amidst the relentless, boundless dunes. Corral was more than a venue for music, trade, and ritual. It stood as a remarkable feat of engineering, showcasing human creativity in one of the most challenging environments on the planet. In the absence of metal tools, the wheel and draft animals, the inhabitants of Corral, crafted a city of stone and earth that has withstood the test of nearly 5,000 years. Their accomplishments were truly remarkable. Great pyramids loomed from the sandy ground, built not with tiny, delicate bricks, but with massive stones transported through the arid expanse. Workers moved rocks with reed bags, clever baskets sturdy enough to carry heavy loads crafted from the very plants that thrived along the riverbanks. Layer upon layer they built with a gentle touch, stacking stone and filling the interiors with rubble to create structures that could endure not only time, but also nature's fury, and they had a deep understanding of nature. Corral is situated in an area known for its intense seismic activity, yet their pyramids and plazas remain mostly unscathed. What's the way? by mastering architecture that can withstand the tremors of the earth. Builders employed adaptable construction methods, layered fill's broad foundations, and gentle curves that enabled their structures to absorb and release seismic energy. It was engineering crafted not from textbooks, but from a deep understanding of the earth itself. Water management was yet another quiet success. Even in the arid expanse of the desert, the inhabitants of Corral crafted intricate irrigation systems. Channels and canals gently directed river water to their agricultural fields, nurturing crops to thrive even in the drier seasons. Every drop was cherished, nothing was squandered. The layout of Corral itself showed thoughtful urban design. Significant structures positioned in harmony with important celestial markers, indicating a profound grasp of the solar rhythms. The sunken plazas, with their precise geometry, served as more than just gathering places. They served as tools for observing the skies, enabling priests and astronomers to forecast seasons essential for survival. Even the city's organization hinted at a layered and intricate society. Residential zones, administrative areas, ceremonial centers, all were arranged in a gentle harmony, softly balancing communal life with sacred spaces. They created with a vision that extended far beyond the present, considering the legacy for years to come. Today, as modern engineers admire Corral's resilience, they are reminded that true greatness transcends mere technology. Sometimes the deepest wisdom lies in understanding the forces of nature, in harmonizing with the land, not opposing it. Corral's stones have quietly withstood storms, quakes, and the gentle passage of time. They remain a quiet reminder of a civilization that wove their aspirations into the stillness of the desert sands. For ages, the city of Corral thrived a gentle glow of tranquility, melody, commerce, and artistic brilliance amidst the desert dunes. And then, softly, almost imperceptibly, it was left behind. No fires marked its fall, no signs of conquest scar its walls, no mass graves or shattered monuments whisper a tale of sudden disaster. Instead, Corral gently slipped away. Its plazas deserted, its pyramids surrendered to the wandering sands, its flutes and drums hushed by the passage of time. What made them go away? That question still drifts softly like a whisper across the super valley. Some scholars think that environmental change delivered the last blow. Evidence hints that an extended dry spell might have severely impacted Corral's farming. Without the river's soothing waters, the fields would have faded away. Trade networks reliant on an abundance of cotton and food would have stumbled. The delicate equilibrium Corral had sustained with its unforgiving surroundings might have ultimately shifted beyond recovery. Some theories suggest that trade routes have been changing. As nearby cultures expanded and fresh centers of authority developed along the coast and further inland, Corral's sway may have lessened. Maybe the products they used to provide, like cottonfish and produce, just weren't sufficient to maintain their status as a leading city anymore. Gradually, the essence of trade faded into the background. Some softly murmur about a gradual fading away. Without written records, we can only drift into thoughts of political struggles, religious upheaval, or the weariness that follows centuries of growth. Even tranquil societies can splinter when the weight of survival looms heavy. Whatever the reason, the departure appears to have unfolded slowly rather than abruptly. Families probably wandered off gradually in search of richer valleys, more powerful rivers, and fresh starts. Children who once wandered through Corral's plazas grew up sharing tales of a hidden city behind them, tales that would gradually drift into myth. The desert slowly took back what was once created by humans. Gentle breezes brushed soft grains across ancient stone temples. Flutes rest quietly beneath the ever-changing sands. What had once been a humming, vibrant civilization became a field of quiet resting mounds. For nearly 4,000 years, Corral lay concealed, a soft murmur beneath the sands, patiently awaiting discovery. Today, as archaeologists gently reveal its stones, the question lingers softly. How does a city so advanced, so beautifully crafted, just fade away? Maybe the reality is that even the most remarkable societies, regardless of their wisdom or tranquility, remain delicate strands intertwined in the fabric of existence, always susceptible to the hidden currents of transformation. For ages, Corral remained undisturbed, hidden beneath the still sands of the Super Valley. Travelers meandered past the peculiar rounded hills that scattered the landscape blissfully, unaware that beneath their feet rested the remnants of a civilization predating the pyramids of Egypt. To them, these were merely gentle rises molded by the breeze and the passage of ages. It wasn't until the late 20th century that the world would finally hear Corral's voice once more. In the 1990s, Peruvian archaeologist Ruth Shady guided a team into the Soup Valley, motivated by a gentle curiosity and a lingering feeling that these hills might conceal mysteries yet to be revealed. What they discovered could change the narrative of human civilization in the Americas. Layer by gentle layer, the sand was softly brushed away. Beneath it emerged walls of meticulously shaped stone, majestic staircases, sunken plazas, pyramids, a city far older than anyone could have envisioned. Radiocarbon dating revealed the astonishing. Corral was over 4,600 years old, existing alongside the earliest civilizations in Mesopotamia and Egypt. It was a revelation that gently stirred the very core of archaeology. Prior to Corral, researchers thought that the development of civilization in the Americas occurred significantly later, overshadowed by the magnificent empires of the ancient world. Corral transformed it all. It demonstrated that the Americas had given rise to impressive architecture, intricate urban life, and social structures on their own, well before the emergence of the Incas or the Maya. Ruth Shady and her team discovered not only stone and rubble, but also traces of life, including musical instruments, fishing nets, textiles, quipu, ancient knot records, and even offerings to the gods. Each artifact whispered tales of a people who had crafted a society with vision, intelligence, and profound creativity. Corral's rediscovery was more than just an academic achievement. It was a revival. A civilization that had rested beneath the desert for thousands of years now stood revealed under the open sky once more, its plazas caressed by the same winds that had once carried the sounds of flutes and the laughter of children. Today, Corral is acknowledged as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a delicate, invaluable connection to humanity's earliest aspirations of constructing belonging and believing. The sands had concealed Corral effectively, yet ultimately the stones remained patiently awaiting someone to hear, to observe, to recall. Carol stands today as a quiet presence, a gentle reminder that civilization's roots stretch far deeper than we once believed. Among its pyramids and plazas, the ancient stones softly share a tale that gently reshapes our understanding of humanity's journey. A tale not of conquest and bloodshed, but of harmony, ingenuity, and hope. Long before the grand empires of Greece, Rome, or even Egypt, the people of Corral were quietly crafting something remarkable. They built pyramids without the wheel, charted the stars without written records, and established a flourishing society grounded in trade, music, ritual, and engineering, while preserving the tranquility of the land. In a time frequently marked by strife, Corral presents an alternative perspective on what society can be, one that cherishes connection rather than conquest and prioritizes knowledge over domination. It gently reminds us that complexity does not necessitate conflict, that true greatness is not gauged by the number of armies that traverse a battlefield, but by how a community unites to build, to create, to dream. Corral's legacy stretches gently beyond the arid sands of the Soup Valley. It questions previous beliefs, suggesting that civilization did not originate from just one place, and that urban living and grand structures were not solely the domain of the ancient world. Corral shows that the spirit of human creativity and ambition emerged in various places around the world, molded by diverse influences, yet propelled by the same timeless yearnings to survive, to rejoice, to strive for something greater. Today, wandering through Corral's weathered ruins, you can almost sense it, the rhythm of drums, the soft whisper of flutes, the quiet chatter of traders negotiating in the plazas, the giggles of children darting through stone alleys beneath a sky filled with countless stars. Their lives, their dreams, their stories linger softly woven into the very fabric of the earth. Corral teaches us that even when civilizations fall, their spirit can endure resting beneath the sands, waiting to be remembered, waiting to inspire again. In the vast expanse of human history, Corral stands not merely as a remnant of what once was, but as a gentle guide for what lies ahead. A soft reminder that even in the most unforgiving deserts, even beneath the weightiest sands, the seeds of curiosity, knowledge, and tranquility can find their way to flourish and create a world that aspires to the heavens.